Hello, this project was inspired by the fit and flare silhouettes of these two dresses. The design details are a fitted bodice with princess seams, a full skirt with inverted pleats, and no waistline seam connecting both. This tutorial is divided into 3 main parts: pattern drafting, fabric cutting, and sewing. I'll be using a vintage Singer sewing machine, the impeccable Model 201K made in Great Britain in 1958. There are some design differences. This dress has a bodice with shoulder princess lines, while this dress has a bodice with armhole princess lines and an additional style line at the armhole. For both dresses, the fitted bodice extends into a full skirt with inverted pleats. For this design, I'll start by adding shoulder princess lines to my bodice pattern blocks. My back block has a shoulder dart, and my front block has a bust dart placed at the mid-shoulder. However, if your drafted front block has a bust dart placed at the side, here's how to move it to the mid-shoulder. First, draw a straight line from the mid-shoulder to the bust point. Then, draw another line from one leg of the side dart to the bust point. Next, cut carefully along both lines. Slide and overlap the paper, closing out the side dart, which effectively moves the dart value to the shoulder. My starting pattern is the semi-fitted block created from the Natalie Bray system. For a closer fit, the excess wearing ease will be removed using the princess style lines. For the sleeveless style, the shoulder seam length will be reduced by 3/4 of an inch. Blend the new shoulder point to the armhole curve. To prepare my princess lines, I will draw out some horizontal lines starting with the true bust line in the front pattern and the across back line in the back pattern. Next, measure the underbust depth, which is the vertical distance from the highest point of the shoulder to just beneath the bust curve. Then, draw the underbust line across that point. Also extend the underbust line from the front to the back block. Next, draw the armhole depth line at the back bodice. Because I want a fitted bodice with only 2 cm of ease added to my actual bust circumference, I'll remove the excess ease on the pattern, starting with 1/2 inch removed from both sides. I'll mark the deduction and draw the new side seam line from the new underarm point to the waistline. I'll draw a short vertical line from the apex of the back waist dart to the across back line. Mark the midpoint along the short vertical line. Connect that point to the dart legs along the waistline, which means redrawing the back waist dart by raising the apex. Next, connect the legs of the back shoulder dart to the top of the waist dart with a smooth curve. Using your curved ruler, draw a gently curved line. And do the same for the other dart leg. And here's the completed princess style line at the back bodice. And now to the front bodice. My goal is to have a final garment with only about 2 cm of ease in the bust, the underbust, and the waist. I will remove any excess ease around the bust and the underbust. Based on my measurements, I'll deduct 1/2 inch along the bust point line and 4 cm along the underbust line. Then, connect the bust dart legs to the contouring points at the underbust line. Using the curved ruler, connect both points with the curved line. I made the following contour intakes: 1/2 inch at the bust point and 4 cm at the underbust. Connect the underbust contour lines to the waist dart legs using straight lines. And here's the completed princess style line at the front bodice. extend the panel lines from the apex of the hip darts down to the hemline. To create a structured silhouette, I extended the hip curve by 2 inches on both sides. Then I redrew the new hip curve from the waist to the hem. And also extend the hemline by 2 inches. And here's the pattern with the exaggerated hip curves. Now separate the style line panels, and when cutting, exclude all the darts, the intake at the shoulder and the intake at the sides. And here are the princess style line panels. While sewing the panels together, the dart equivalents are embedded within the seams. Finally, draft the inverted pleats at the bottom section. Spread out the panel pieces based on your preference of how full you want the lower section to be. Place a piece of paper within the spreaded area. This will serve as the pleats underlay. The width of my pleat underlay is 6 inches at the hemline. Repeat this process for the front panels. Now, tape down the pleat underlay piece to the other panel pieces, creating one piece. Finally, add seam and hem allowances all around the pattern pieces. Here's the completed front dress pattern and the completed back dress pattern. I used the following sewing supplies: brocade fabric, polyester lining, invisible zip 24 inches long, and matching thread. I layered the fabric, placed the patterns over it, and cut. I ended up with 2 pieces for the front and 2 pieces for the back. Cut the lining pieces with the same process. 2 lining pieces for the front and 2 lining pieces for the back. Now slightly trim the top edges of the lining pieces. This ensures that it stays inside the dress. Trim 1/8 of an inch from the shoulder point, blending into the armhole curve, and 1/8 of an inch from the neck point, blending into the neckline curve. Start by sewing the princess seams on the separate pieces, 8 in total. Fold the fabric precisely so that you produce an L-shaped corner seam. Do the same for the lining pieces. Because of the curves and contours along the princess line, I recommend first pinning before sewing. This is how to sew an L-shaped corner seam precisely. When you reach the corner, let the needle stay in the down position. Then, lift the presser foot up, pivot the fabric, and sew the rest of the seam. Press the curved seams carefully. Here's the stitched princess line at the top and the inverted pleats at the bottom. Because the zip will be placed at the center front, stitch the 2 back pieces together to create one piece. And here's the single back piece. Do the same for the lining back pieces. At this point, you would have a single back piece and 2 front pieces for the shell and for the lining. I pressed 1 inch fusible interfacing to the center front edge for zip stability. To attach the single back piece to the 2 front pieces, place the front pieces on the back piece precisely, and then sew along the sides from the underarm point to the hemline. Here are the joined front and back shell pieces and the joint front and back lining pieces also stitched along the sides. Join the shell dress to the lining dress. Place the lining piece on the shell piece with the right sides of fabric touching. Pin both pieces together along the neckline and the armhole. Now stitch the shell and the lining together across the following locations: front neck, back neck, front neck, right armhole, left armhole. Don't sew the shoulders together at this point. When sewing both sides of the front neck, leave a 1-inch gap unstitched. This will create space to stitch the zip along the center front edge. After sewing, flip the lining inwards towards the wrong fabric side of the shell. Once this is done, press the neckline curves and the armhole curves to remove any bulges. Next, stitch the shoulders of the lining and the shell. First, close the left side of the dress, and then flip the front lining piece over to the back lining. And after flipping, you should end up with the front lining shoulder touching the back lining shoulder, and the front shell fabric shoulder touching the back shell fabric shoulder. Sew a tubular seam around, joining lining against lining and shell against shell. It's highly advisable to pin before sewing a tube seam. While sewing, just keep pushing the fabric around as the needle moves. And after sewing, you'd observe that the lining and shell pieces are separate from each other, even though their respective shoulders have been completely stitched together. Now follow the exact same process and stitch the right shoulder. Attach an invisible zipper to the center front edges. This gives a clean, discreet finish compared to a regular zipper. Then, flip the lining outwards. Now place the center front edge of the lining precisely against the center front edge of the shell, and then stitch both together against the same allowance just behind the zipper teeth. And after sewing, you'd achieve a partially bagged lining finish. It's a very clean and professional finish because the stitches will be concealed on the inside. Finally, close up the 1-inch gap that was left at the neckline. To achieve a structured hem, I'm going to use hem facing, 3.5 inches wide and long enough to go round the dress hem. Fusible interfacing has been pressed onto the wrong side to give the required weight and firmness. I serged one edge of the facing strips. Now place the facing against the dress with the right sides facing. The unserged edge of the facing should be against the dress hemline. Then stitch both together with a 1/4 inch sewing allowance. Afterwards, understitch the facing so that it lays flat. Finally, flip it inwards inside the dress, sewing again with a blind stitch against the serged edge of the facing. I love my new dress. It has a youthful feminine silhouette and I really enjoyed the process. Thank you for watching!